The loud echo of laughter rang through the halls, but it wasn't the laughter you'd expect from happiness. No, this was the kind of laughter that cut through the air like a knife. It was aimed at her. Amara stood by her locker, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound of mocking voices reached her ears, each word like a cruel slap to her face. She wished, more than anything, that she could just disappear. But there she was, in her worn-out sneakers, her dress that had seen better days, and a jacket that was far too thin for the cold. She could feel their eyes on her, the whispers, the stares, the laughter that followed her every step. If you want to know how Amara finds her strength and turns her life around, don't miss the next part of this journey. Hit that subscribe button and be part of her story as it unfolds. You won't want to miss what happens next. She tried to ignore it. She told herself it wasn't that bad. After all, what could she do? Her mother worked tirelessly, but the money never stretched far enough. They had never been rich, but lately it seemed like they were falling further behind. Still, Amara tried to make the best of what little she had. She didn't want to stand out, to give people another reason to point at her. But no matter how hard she tried, the ragged clothes always stood out like a flashing neon sign. Today it was no different. She felt the familiar sting as a group of girls approached her, their whispers barely masked by the laughter. "Is that her only shirt? It looks like it's from a yard sale," one of them sneered. Amara clenched her fists, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. She had heard it all before, but that didn't make it any easier. The weight of their words pressed down on her chest, suffocating her, and for a moment, she wished she could vanish into thin air. She just wanted to get to class without being the target of their cruel jokes. "Come on, Amara. Is that really the best you can do?" another girl said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You look like you slept in a trash bin." The laughter grew louder, more relentless. Amara's face burned. She could feel her heart sinking, her confidence slipping further and further away. She had always been told to rise above the taunts, to hold her head high. But when you're constantly reminded of how different you are, how poor you are, it becomes harder and harder to find the strength to stand tall. She turned quickly, hoping they wouldn't see the tears threatening to fall. Her classmates weren't the only ones who noticed her struggle. The other students in the hallway seemed to glance her way, some whispering behind their hands, others pretending they didn't see. It wasn't fair, she knew that. But fairness didn't seem to matter much in her world. The world where you were judged by what you wore, not who you were. The world where no one saw the girl beneath the ragged clothes. As she walked to class, Amara's mind raced. If only I could be someone else. Someone with a nice clean shirt. Someone who doesn't get laughed at every single day. But she wasn't someone else. She was Amara, the girl with the hand-me-down clothes and the dreams that felt so far out of reach. And right now, all she could do was try to survive another day in a world that seemed determined to make her feel invisible. And yet, deep down, she knew something had to change. She didn't know how, and she didn't know when, but she couldn't keep living like this. Something had to give. As she sat down at her desk, her eyes blurred with tears she refused to let fall, the bell rang, signaling the start of another long day. Little did she know, today would be the day that everything changed. The bell echoed through the halls, but Amara didn't move. She sat in her seat, her hands clenched tightly around the edge of her desk, her mind swirling with thoughts she couldn't quiet. Her classmates chatted around her, their voices a distant hum, but all she could focus on were the cruel words from earlier that day. The mocking laughter, the sharp comments, the feeling of being so invisible. She stared down at the frayed edges of her sleeves, the fabric worn thin from years of use. "Why am I like this?" she thought, a question that seemed to echo through her mind with each passing day. Why does it always have to be me? She didn't know what she had done to deserve this, to be the one who always seemed to stand out for all the wrong reasons. It wasn't like she chose to wear ragged clothes. Her mother did her best to keep her clothed, but money was always tight. Amara had learned to be grateful for what she had, even if it wasn't much. But it was hard to feel thankful when every glance from her classmates felt like a judgment. She felt like she was being punished for something she hadn't even done. Her mother worked long hours at a local diner, coming home exhausted with barely enough to keep food on the table. Amara had always admired her mother's strength, the way she kept pushing forward despite the weight of the world on her shoulders. But Amara couldn't help but feel that her mother's struggles were slowly becoming her own. The idea of not having enough, of always scraping by, had started to define her. It was hard to escape it. She glanced over at the window, her mind drifting back to the summer, a time when things had seemed brighter before the bullying had really started. Back then, she used to dream of a life where she didn't have to worry about how she looked or whether she'd be mocked for her clothes. She imagined what it would be like to go to school in a brand new outfit, to walk the halls without feeling the sting of stares. But those dreams felt like they belonged to someone else, someone who didn't have to wear second-hand clothes or feel the weight of every unkind word. Why couldn't she be like them, the other girls, the ones who had everything, the ones who wore the latest fashion and didn't have to worry about anything, the ones who never got laughed at? Amara wanted to be invisible. If she could just slip into the background, maybe she wouldn't feel so small, so worthless. Maybe, if she could disappear, the teasing would stop, and she could finally catch her breath. She didn't know how to handle it anymore. Each day the bullying seemed to grow more intense and she felt herself shrinking under the weight of it. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sharp voice of her teacher calling the class to attention. But even as she nodded absently, trying to focus, she couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. Trapped in a world where she didn't fit in, where she didn't have the things she needed to be happy. And, more than anything, trapped in the silence that followed her every step. The silence that came when no one stood up for her. Why does no one ever step in? She wondered. Why does it feel like I'm all alone in this? The day dragged on like it always did, the minutes stretching into hours as Amara counted down the seconds until the final bell would ring. Her mind was elsewhere, consumed by the thoughts of how she would avoid the group of girls after school. She couldn't face them again, not today. It was as she was leaving the building, her shoulders slumped under the weight of the world, that she noticed something unusual. A man was standing at the edge of the schoolyard, leaning against a sleek black car, watching the students pass by. He wasn't dressed like the usual parents who came to pick up their kids. He wore a simple jacket and jeans, but there was something about him that stood out. He had an air of calmness, something she couldn't quite place. Amara wasn't sure why, but something about him felt different. She tried to avoid looking his way, but as she passed, her eyes caught his, and for a brief moment, their gazes locked. It was a strange feeling, one she couldn't quite explain. The way his eyes softened as they met hers, as if he understood exactly what she was going through. For a second, Amara wondered if she had imagined it, but then he straightened up, taking a step toward her, his movements slow and deliberate, as though he knew exactly what to say. "Hey," he said, his voice kind and gentle, yet carrying an authority that made her stop in her tracks. "Are you okay?" Amara blinked, taken off guard. She had never expected anyone to notice her, especially not someone like him, someone who didn't look like they belonged in this part of town. He was different, almost out of place, but there was something comforting in his presence, something that made her feel like she could trust him, even if just for a moment. "I'm fine," she muttered, her voice barely audible. She didn't want to be rude, but she didn't want to talk to anyone either. She just wanted to get home, away from the eyes that followed her wherever she went. The man seemed to sense her discomfort, but he didn't push. Instead, he took another step closer, lowering his voice. "You don't look fine, kid. You look like you've been through a lot." Amara's heart skipped a beat. How could he know? She hadn't said anything, hadn't shown anyone the pain she carried with her every day. But somehow he saw through her mask. "I don't know what you're going through," he continued, "but I do know this. You're worth so much more than what you think." Amara stared at him, the words sinking in slowly. It wasn't just his words, it was the way he said them, like he believed them with everything he had. She had heard plenty of people say things to her, but there was something different about him. He wasn't just telling her what she wanted to hear, it felt real. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice trembling despite herself. You don't even know me. He smiled gently, a look of understanding in his eyes. You don't need to be known to be worthy of respect, kid. You deserve that, just like anyone else. Amara swallowed, feeling something stir within her. It wasn't something she was used to. Kindness, respect, someone seeing her for who she truly was, not just the clothes she wore. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she just nodded, unsure of how to respond to this stranger who seemed to understand her better than anyone else. Look, I know it's hard, but you've got to remember that your worth isn't measured by what others say. It's about who you are inside, he said, his voice warm and steady. For the first time in what felt like forever, Amara felt like someone was truly listening to her, like someone cared, and for that brief moment, it felt like everything was going to be okay. She started, but then the sound of a car engine starting interrupted her. She looked up, startled to see the man turning to walk back to the sleek car. Take care of yourself, kid, he said, offering her one last smile before getting into the car. Amara stood there frozen as the car disappeared down the street. She could still feel the warmth of his words lingering, like a light that had been turned on in a place she didn't know was dark. She wasn't sure what to make of it all. But one thing was certain. This encounter had changed something within her. It was like a small seed of hope had been planted in her heart. Maybe things could be different. Maybe she could be different. And for the first time that day, Amara smiled. Amara walked home that evening with a mix of emotions bubbling inside her. The encounter with the man, Keanu, kept playing over and over in her mind. The way he had looked at her, like he saw something valuable hidden beneath the surface. She had never felt like that before. Maybe he's right, she thought. Maybe I do deserve more than this. The next day, Amara found herself standing in the same spot by her locker, still processing everything Keanu had said to her. His words echoed in her head. Your worth isn't measured by what others say. It's about who you are inside. Her classmates passed by, oblivious to her thoughts, laughing and chatting as if nothing was wrong. But for the first time, Amara felt like she was somewhere else, somewhere apart from them. Why do they care so much about what I wear? She wondered. Why does it matter so much? Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard footsteps approach. She looked up, startled to see Keanu again, standing by the same spot with that same calm demeanor. He had a knowing smile on his face, as if he had been expecting her. Hey kid, he said softly. How you doing? Amara blinked, surprised by how familiar he felt now. She hadn't expected him to come back, let alone speak to her again. She hadn't even realized how badly she needed someone to talk to until now. I'm okay, she said, her voice tentative. She hesitated, unsure of how to explain everything she was feeling. I keep thinking about what you said yesterday, it's just... I don't know. It doesn't make sense. All my life I've been told to be quiet and fit in. But now, I'm supposed to believe that I'm worth something just because of who I am. Keanu's smile softened as he leaned against the locker beside her. It's hard to believe, isn't it? Especially when you've been told the opposite for so long. Amara nodded, her chest tightening. It feels like I'm invisible. Everyone just sees the ragged clothes. They don't see me. Keanu's eyes softened with empathy. I get it, but I want you to remember something. Clothes don't define who you are. Your worth is not tied to the brand of your shoes or the price of your shirt. It's in how you treat others, how you carry yourself, how you approach life, and above all, it's in your heart. Amara looked at him, searching his face for any hint of sarcasm, but there was none. He was speaking from the heart. Could it really be that simple? Keanu paused for a moment, his expression thoughtful. You know, he began, when I first started out, I was just another guy trying to make a name for himself. But I learned something early on that I wish I could tell everyone who feels like they don't measure up. It doesn't matter where you start. What matters is where you go from here, and that journey, it's about you. Not your clothes, not your circumstances, you. Amara's heart raced as she took in his words. She had always believed that she had to be perfect, that she had to wear the right things, look the right way, in order to be accepted. But Keanu was telling her that the things she thought mattered so much, those things that had been weighing her down, didn't matter at all. What truly mattered was how she carried herself, how she treated others, and the person she was deep down. "Do you really believe that?" Amara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu's smile widened. "I don't just believe it, kid. I know it. Trust me when I say that your value has nothing to do with what anyone else thinks of you. It's all about how you see yourself." Amara's mind was racing. Could this really be true? Could I really be worth something just by being me? Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance. "You've already got what it takes. You just need to believe it." Amara stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. "Maybe for the first time in my life I can believe in myself." "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "Thank you for showing me that." Keanu nodded, his smile warm. "No problem. Just remember, never let anyone make you feel small. You're bigger than that." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Amara standing there, feeling lighter than she had in years. She took a deep breath, the world feeling just a little bit brighter. For the first time, she realized that her worth wasn't tied to her clothes or her past. It was about her heart, her strength, and the person she was becoming. And maybe, just maybe, she could finally believe in herself. The next morning, Amara woke up with a sense of purpose she had never felt before. She stood in front of the mirror staring at her reflection. She saw the same girl she had always seen, the one with the frayed sleeves, the worn-out shoes, and the hair that was a little too messy. But today, she didn't see just that. Today, she saw someone strong, someone who had something valuable to offer the world. Her eyes sparkled with a new energy, and a smile tugged at the corners of her lips. She wasn't going to let the world define her anymore. She wasn't going to let the bullies or anyone else make her feel like she wasn't enough. She was enough. As she walked into school that morning, she noticed something strange. The usual whispers, the stares, none of it seemed to bother her like it did before. She wasn't walking with her head down, avoiding eye contact. No. Today she walked with her chin up, shoulders back, and a quiet confidence that radiated from within. When the group of girls passed by, the ones who had tormented her the most, Amara didn't flinch. She didn't hide her face. Instead, she stood tall and met their gaze. They stared at her for a moment, surprised by the change in her posture, in the way she carried herself. One of them sneered, "What's with the attitude today, Amara?" Amara smiled, not out of mockery, but out of peace. "I'm just being myself," she said, her voice steady. "And you know what? That's enough for me." The girls exchanged glances, confused by her calmness. But Amara didn't care. She wasn't afraid of their opinions anymore. They could laugh, they could judge, but it didn't matter. What mattered was how she felt about herself. And for the first time in a long time, she felt good enough. In the days that followed, Amara's transformation continued. She began to speak up more in class, to offer help when others needed it, to raise her hand without fear of judgment. She stopped hiding in the shadows, stopped thinking she had to be someone else to fit in. She was finally comfortable with who she was. The bullies still whispered, but Amara no longer cared. She didn't need their approval. What mattered was that she had learned to accept herself, to love herself, ragged clothes and all. By the end of the week, even her classmates started to notice the change. Some of them, who had once looked down on her, began to treat her with more respect. They saw her confidence, her kindness, and they couldn't help but be drawn to her light. Amara walked through the halls with a quiet strength, her head held high, knowing that she was more than enough. And she had Keanu to thank for helping her see it. Amara walked home that afternoon with a feeling she hadn't experienced before: peace. The world around her seemed quieter, not because the noise had stopped, but because her mind had calmed. The usual chatter of her classmates, the whispers behind her back, and the taunts from the bullies, they all faded into the background. Today she was different. Today she was herself, and that was more than enough. As she passed the familiar school gate, she glanced around at the other students, but this time she didn't feel small. She didn't shrink under their gazes. Instead, she held her head high, walking with a sense of self-assurance that had been absent for so long. The ragged clothes that had once made her feel like an outsider now seemed like nothing more than a detail. They didn't define her. She did. The group of girls who had once been her biggest tormentors were still there, chatting among themselves as usual. Amara could hear their laughter from a distance, but it didn't sting like it used to. They noticed her approaching and stopped talking for a moment, their eyes following her every step. But Amara didn't flinch. She didn't look away. Instead, she smiled to herself, a small, confident smile that spoke volumes about how far she had come. One of the girls, the same one who had made fun of her most, sneered as she looked Amara up and down. "What's up with you, Amara? You look different. What's going on?" Amara paused for a moment, her expression calm. "I'm just being me," she said, her voice steady and strong. "And that's all I need to be." The girl blinked, clearly thrown off by the change in Amara's demeanor. She opened her mouth as if to say something more, but stopped herself. The other girls were silent, eyeing Amara in a way that made her realize something. They didn't have the power to affect her anymore. They couldn't make her feel small, and that was more than she could have ever imagined. As Amara continued walking, she felt a sense of freedom wash over her. It wasn't the freedom of escaping from the bullies or proving them wrong. It was the freedom of finally accepting herself. She no longer needed validation from anyone else. She had learned that her worth wasn't tied to what others thought of her. It was something that came from within, from the strength of her heart and the way she chose to see herself. She thought about Keanu again, about the way his words had impacted her, how he had shown her the importance of looking beyond appearances, how her value was so much more than the clothes she wore. His words had opened her eyes to a new way of seeing herself, and she would never forget the lesson he had given her. That night, as she sat down at the kitchen table, her mum looked at her with a mix of surprise and admiration. "You seem different, Amara," she said. "There's something about you today." Amara smiled softly, feeling a warmth in her chest. "I am different, Mom," she replied, "and it feels good." Her mum raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. She could see the change in her daughter's eyes. It wasn't just about the way she held herself, it was about the light that had sparked within her. Amara had found peace, and that peace came from something far more important than clothes or the opinions of others. It came from within her, a quiet, powerful strength that couldn't be shaken. As Amara finished her dinner and went up to her room that night, she took a moment to look at herself in the mirror. The girl staring back at her was no longer the timid, self-conscious child she had been just a few days ago. No, this girl was someone who had discovered her worth. She was someone who had learned to love herself for who she was, not for what she wore. For the first time in a long while, Amara felt proud of who she was. She had come so far. And it wasn't just about the bullies or the clothes or the way people saw her. It was about embracing the person she was, imperfections and all. She knew now that she was enough, and that nothing could take that away from her. And as she lay down to sleep that night, Amara couldn't help but think of Keanu and the way he had shown her a new way of looking at the world. She would never forget what he had taught her, and for the first time, she could say that she truly believed it. She was worthy, just as she was. Her future, whatever it might hold, was hers to shape. She had the strength to face anything that came her way, and that was a power no one could ever take from her. As Amara drifted off to sleep, she smiled to herself, knowing that her journey had just begun. The world was full of possibilities, and for the first time, she felt ready to embrace them all. She was enough, and that was all she needed to know. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring journeys. Remember, you're worth more than you can imagine. Stay strong and keep shining. See you in the next one.